Hey everyone, welcome to our first Q&A video. We're doing this as part of the free workshop from the Balanced Riding course. And I'm going to be popping in here almost every day, answering your questions, and we're going to start going through some videos very soon too. So today I have 4 questions that I'm going to go through, and we're going to go through these pretty rapid fire. I want to expand the discussion on especially the last 2, but I want to go through these and give you just one thing to do from each of these for those that ask the question, but also for everyone else. I think you're going to find that you'll have some really good takeaways from these. So here's the theme. First question is going to be about reuniting with a horse after time away. This is one that I can really relate to. Second question is going to be about a horse that doesn't enjoy grooming in one particular area of their body. Third question is about position. And this is how I want to answer this question is how I titled this video. The thing that I find is most misunderstood about riding position. The third is about horse behavior and how often we need to give a cue. So let's jump up here to the first one. This question came in from Lynn, and it was, how do I reunite with a horse after time away? So I have done a lot of traveling in the last few years, and my main horse lives here in Mexico. His name is Canelo. And recently I was back at our farm and what was the farm campus of horse class in Pennsylvania for 6 months. And I hadn't seen Canelo at all during that time. So when I came back, what I did to reunite is the first 2 weeks, I basically just was hanging out. I wasn't riding him. I wasn't asking much of him at all. I was just spending a lot of time out in the field, hanging out, looking for ways to give value to him. Just like any good relationship, the more that we can give value to the other in that relationship, the stronger that it's going to become. So I would go across to the other side of the fence and pick the greener grass for him. I would just hang out and do what one of our horse class instructors, Andrea Wadey, calls watching the outside environment. So if he was resting, I would just hang out with him and be looking around, essentially being like the guardian. As the horses, when there's a group, often there will be one that's watching as others rest. So that was a way to add value. I would look for favorite scratching spots. And one of the big things that this is something that's very true for Canelo, because he's not a kind of horse that necessarily likes lots and lots of touch and lots of closeness. So with him, if he would come over, I would scratch him and we might have more of a close tactile connection. And then he would walk away and I wouldn't worry about it. So I wouldn't follow him. I wouldn't feel like I had to be right there. And I also didn't do the things that we humans sometimes think we have to do or like to do. I didn't groom him during that time. I mean, he likes grooming as much as an average horse, but he doesn't love it. So I didn't groom him. His feet weren't unhealthy long, but they were a little long. I would have liked to jump in there and give him a trim the first day just because it would have made me feel better. But he didn't need it. He doesn't love having his feet trimmed, so I didn't trim his feet either. I really just focused on doing the things that I know he enjoyed, and I felt it helped our relationship go to a much stronger place in those 2 weeks, especially after that long break. So thank you. Great question, Lynn. Next question came in from Q. And Q has a horse that is reacting when she's grooming her neck. She said that she can feel the muscles are very tight on this mare's neck. I believe it's a mare Q. But along grooming her other places on her body, she seems to be fine. So it's isolated around the neck. So it definitely seems like it would be something that has a physical connection to this point of the horse's body. So whether she's just very tight there, whether she's holding tension, stiffness, and soreness there, what I would do is, again, I actually wouldn't focus on grooming it. These are the times that we have the things that We want to see our horse really clean. We want to do the things that make us feel good and make us feel like we're caring for them. But sometimes the best thing we can do is the opposite of that. And it's actually by doing a bit less. So instead of really working to go through this and to groom the neck, I would, and I know Q, you said this is not a horse of your own. So in terms of looking into, really what is the problem and say getting a vet out, it doesn't sound like it's an option. One thing that you can do is the bladder meridian of the Masterson method technique. If you search that, you will find free videos of Jim Masterson demonstrating this one technique. It's a very not invasive at all, a very light touch technique. We at Horse Class have a program with Jim Masterson as well. And this is one of the core techniques, but this is what I would do for this mare, the bladder meridian. It does start at the pole, runs down the neck, runs down the back, and down over the horse's hindquarters. And one of the interesting points of Jim Masterson's work, and this is also true for a lot of body work, is that oftentimes when a horse releases tension in one part of the body, it can help other parts. So by doing this bladder meridian, it's not that you need to focus on the neck where the soreness is. You may find that you spend more time in other places of the body, and it's going to help this mare's neck. So long story short, I would let the grooming go. I would focus on the bladder meridian technique and see if this helps. Okay, next question. This is the one I want to focus on for today's video. So when we're riding, do we have our legs completely relaxed, or do we have a little bit of tension in our legs? So this is something that I find is so misunderstood, and I often see riders going from one or the other extreme. So the one extreme being pushing on the stirrups, pushing the heels down, swinging the stirrups forward, and putting a lot of pressure on the stirrups in order to feel more secure. This isn't a great position because it's going to brace the joints of the leg, which means that the hip cannot move as freely and the rider can't move as well with the horse. But if we do the other opposite, and this is where the rider will often then bring their leg back, but then they have their toe pointed down, their heel up, and their leg is, yes, it's relaxed, but it's also not a secure position. So what we really want is between the two. We want to have, especially when we're riding in motion, when you're doing your rising trot, when you're doing your canter, if you're riding in a light seat, there's this feeling that your leg is kind of reaching for the ground without gripping the horse and without pushing on the stirrup. And even to describe it sounds a little bit like a, it's difficult to describe in words. So one way that you can get the feeling of this is the next time that you're riding, take your foot out of the stirrup and pull your heel down and back. Back being that key point. So many riders think heels down and they swing the leg forward. Think about bringing your heel down, but back, like you were reaching it back towards your horse's hind leg. What you should feel is a bit of engagement underneath of your glute muscle, down through the back of your thigh, and probably through the back of your calf as well. And this is the feeling that we need to maintain. It's kind of this feeling of a stretch of the leg without gripping, without bracing. This is really helpful, I find, for new riders as they're learning to ride the trot, as they're learning to keep their leg steady in canter. But it also helps even really experienced riders get a more steady leg to be able to have much more precise leg cues. So again, the exercise to try is reach down and back with your heel to feel this stretch through the back of your leg. Sorry, we had a brief loss of connection here, and now it's popped me back on. So it's this idea that sometimes in fitness is called positive tension, which basically means that we're putting some tension into the muscles by lengthening them instead of by contracting them and making them tight. All right, last question is, when working with a horse, when training, what is the attention span that we can expect? And this one is especially fascinating for me right now because as I'm always working with horses, right now I'm mostly working with my own horse, as well as working with a yearling who's just learning to wear the halter. Those are the main two that I'm focused on at the moment. I'm also working with a pack of dogs. We have quite a few rescues here in Mexico, and I'm working on teaching them just their basic obedience, basic, be nice dogs that live around the house that don't jump on people. And the attention span between dogs and horses is quite different. They've even shown this with a study that I always like to bring up to illustrate this, where they would have two buckets of food and they would have the horse or the dog, so the individual participating in the study, they would have them standing watching the buckets being held by a person. They would drop food in one of the two buckets. They would hold the individual, horse or dog, for a certain amount of time. They would release them and they would see, did they remember which bucket the food was in and go directly to that bucket? Or did they essentially forget and need to go up and search both buckets in order to find it? And what they found is that there was quite a bit of time variance between the horses and dogs. So, they had some dogs with short attention spans too. They had some horses that did quite well. But on average, the dogs could remember which bucket that food was dropped into for over a minute. The horses were much shorter. For many of the horses, it was only 10 or 15 seconds, and then essentially they were needing to go up and search. They no longer had the memory; they were going off of smell and visual to see where the food was. So what this illustrates for me in our training is that, one, when our horses are learning, it can be really helpful to have a signal for attention. So if you've heard people working with horses that are using verbal commands and they'll say, and walk, and trot, part of what that and is for the horse is a signal for attention. So it's saying, hey, something is coming, the next cue is coming, pay attention. It's something that as riders we can also do with our body when we're riding without saying anything verbally, is you change your body. Say you're just sitting, relaxing on your horse, you change your body, you start to sit up a little bit more, you shift your weight. That's a signal to the horse can do the same, and then you give your signal. I want you to back up, I want you to walk forward, I want you to start a turn on the forehand, for example. So when we can have these little signals for attention for our horses, it can be really helpful. And the other thing to remember is not to get frustrated. If your horse loses attention, if they get distracted by something else, this is part of who they are as a species, is that they're designed to be scanning the environment, to be watching for things. And because of that, their attention can easily get pulled. So part of our training needs to be helping the horse develop longer duration in behavior. For example, learn to keep the rhythm that we put them in that we ask for as we're riding, or to hold a cue like staying in one place and ground tying. But we need to have some patience as we increase the duration for our horses. So those are our 4 questions for today. I hope that you enjoyed. Remember that this is part of the Balanced Riding Course workshop. Our Balanced Riding course will be opening up for enrollment next week. And I will be popping in here to answer more questions. I'm going to be posting a question that's based on the very first video of the workshop training. So look